Back to the program. I have joining me right now Yomi Olugbenro, who is the West Africa tax leader at Deloitte, as well as Aminat Jegede, a senior manager tax regulatory and people services at KPMG Nigeria. Welcome to you both, and thank you for joining me. I'm in the nation's capital. Both of you are in Lagos, where one of the controversies is being generated. Thank you, Yomi, for joining me. Aminat, good to see you. So let's get started. I think I'll start with Yomi. We've been seeing what's been happening, at least in the last few days, right from August 9th till August 19th, when in Rivers State, Governor Wike, a bill was passed August 9th. 10 days later, we saw a bill signed. How are you reading through these commentaries, the federal government and the state's VAT war? Yomi, over to you.
All right, Nancy, good morning and good to be on your show. So it's a very interesting development in our in the fiscal space. And maybe for starters, all of these agitations and all of these moves by state, we all understand that it's driven out of, the desire for a fairer, more equitable basis for revenue generation and revenue allocation, and all of that. So it's quite an interesting one. I'm particularly happy that this is happening from a legal perspective, yes, in as much as it's throwing in a lot of challenges and troubles in the business space. I think the fact that we're trying to use the instrumentality of the law to resolve, some of the fiscal federalism conversation that, politically we've not been able to find an easy answer to. I think it's important. But what I think we all just need to do is to realize that for every move, there are wider implications for those steps and for those decisions. So it may get us all excited that states, are, waking up. Some states may be excited that power is being given to them and they can do a lot more with the revenue in their state. But the devil is in the details. The practical implementation of even the law as we have it, and whether this will, in the short term, be beneficial to the state, the jury is out there. I have my worries, I have my doubts. So for me, I think we really need to look at all angles. What is the legal implication? What is the economic implication? What is the implication on businesses? And will it really, deliver the increased revenue from VAT that the states, are clamoring for? So it's not as easy as many states are making it look like, Nancy.
Okay, let me bring in Aminat here. Speak to me about your own thoughts too, because I've spoken to a few people on this issue. Is Aminat still there? I've spoken to a few people.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, I've spoken to a few people on these issues, and there are different schools of thought. What's your own school of thought? What have you been reading from the commentary so far?
Okay, so I've also been following the commentary and, just looking at the different school of thoughts. And my own personal thought is that there are merits to both arguments. So there's a school of thought that wants the status quo to be retained, which is basically saying that let the federal government continue to administer the tax, while the school of thought of those that are pushing for fiscal federalism are saying that this is something that is within the purview of the state as envisaged by the Constitution. So there are pros and cons, like Yomi have mentioned, for each of these arguments. And the interesting thing and the interesting point, like he has also said, is that it's a good thing that this is actually going through the legal route, so that at the end of the day, whatever decision is taken will have been seen to be fair to both parties. So yes, the jury is out. Let's continue to follow the discussion, and also let's ensure that whatever happens, the rule of law prevails.
Yomi, let me bring you back in, and Aminat, still stay with us. If we take a look at these issues, let's take a look at the facts and the fiction of the matter, because I've read quite a lot on this, especially from the economic perspective, and I don't want to be drawn into the politicization, so to speak, of the matter, or the ethnic coloration of it. Though I know that is part of it, it's with the matter we're seeing right now, it seems like it's us versus them. So if we take a look at the facts of this VAT collection, what are your views on it. We'll come back to perhaps the politics of it a bit later, because I know that when it comes to politics too, it's a matter of numbers, like they say.
Yeah, so you're right. So there are different dimensions. So there is the political side, there is the legal side, and there's the economic side. So what previously obtained was that we have a federal VAT legislation that empowers the Federal Inland Revenue Services to, administer the tax on behalf of all of the tiers of government. And when this is done, VAT is, is payable by all citizens across the country. Imports, both goods and services, resident of FCT. So by the time all of this is aggregated, it is then apportioned among the 3 tiers of government. So federal government get 15%. State get 50, and then local government get 30. And then between the state and local government, there is then a second layer of sharing formula, which try to allocate these revenues among the various states and local governments. So, for example, whatever goes to state, for example, 20% of that is shared based on derivation formula. 50% is shared based on equality, and 30% is done based on population. Now, so the complaint by all of the states that got us here is that the percentages that is allocated to derivation seems to be too low and unfair, and a number of states will give data as to how much VAT is collected within their state and compare that with how much they eventually get. So there are arguments that the states that are putting in more are not, getting enough from the allocation, and there are states that are putting in much lower than the amount they are getting, because the allocation metrics just appear to be, too much in favor of equality and, and a population. So that's the whole of the argument. Now, it doesn't mean that maybe part of the myth to unravel is the fact that, number one, the fact that this money is being paid out from the center, it's not necessarily the federal government, just giving out free gifts to states. That's not true. FRS is an agency of the federal government and is collecting on behalf of all of the states. So it's a legitimate entitlement of all of the states to get what is at the center. So sometimes, we use the phrase of, people gathering at Abuja, with hands, cap in hand to collect. So it is the legitimate right of the state. So it's not federal government doing any state any favor. That's the first point. The second point is that the argument around a fairer and more equitable allocation basis is actually also very, very appropriate. In every system, there will always be need for us to review, is this still fair? Is this still fair for FRS, for example, to have 4% cost of collection? Can that be reduced, slightly lower now that there's an improved efficiency? So there's a whole lot of argument. Now, but because the conversation, I hope you can still hear me.
Yes, I can hear you,
because
Yomi.
the agitation doesn't appear to be getting the right response. That's why the state now want to take their fate in their hand to say, look, in the first instance, VAT or tax on consumption it's not necessarily on the exclusive legislative list, so it shouldn't even be within the purview of the federal. So I want to legislate on that locally. Let me have a law that empowers my state internal revenue services, and then I will do the collection and keep for myself. Now that's why we are where we are. But the point I am making, so that I can wrap this up and let Aminat maybe have a perspective, is that in as much as there is legitimacy in the agitation for a more fair and equitable basis for allocation, a number of the arguments that are being used, both in terms of the data, in terms of how which state will benefit, which state will lose, and how much more some states will rake in just by having their own locally domesticated VAT law. Those data need to be interrogated a lot more. From my own initial analysis, there's virtually no state in the short term that will benefit from having a local VAT law. Not Lagos State, not River State, not any state, because there's a lot of challenge, there's a lot of process, there's a lot of hurdle to cross before you get to the level of efficiency where you will be able to equate what you currently get at the federal from a federal system and be able to up that. So in the short term, at the minimum, it's not likely going to be beneficial to any state. So maybe they will eventually get there in the long run. But beyond all of that, it's also not good for business. It's also not good for, I mean, imagine having businesses dealing with 37 internal revenue services just for the purposes of reconciling their VAT and filing VAT returns. It's going to complicate an already bad, paying tax environment. So it's good. It may be a yes if we ask what does the law says. It may be a yes if we ask what is good for fiscal federalism. But if you look at it in terms of the overall polity and overall business community, it's not going to be good from the administrative convenience for taxpayer. It's not going to be good for business because there are several layers in the process that may just end up, increasing the cost of doing business. If, for example, you cannot get input VAT deductible from across the states, all right, you will need to multiply, finance officers and tax personnel that will help you in the process of administering this. So overall, a centralized system may be a lot more better for us to administer. So let's look at the questions, that is giving rise to the agitation, and let's try to deal with that, and let's try to balance the unfairness in the system, and maybe we can get back to the center to be able to have a more pragmatic solution.
Let me come to Aminat here now because, Yomi, you've raised a number of issues. You're shaking the table, as they've said, because we perhaps need to interrogate, yes, we need to interrogate the VAT revenue coming in from the state so that it doesn't make us look as if we are living in an illusion, so to speak. But let me come to Aminat at this point. The issue of the debate we're having right now, is it more of a distribution issue or sharing formula issue or a collection issue or a mixture of both? That's the first perspective. The second perspective is also what Yomi has said. Perhaps we should leave it as it is centrally, right now, centrally collected. But perhaps we should come up with a Nigerianized structure. I put it a Nigerianized structure in the sense that when it states, whatever a state collects, that's which a state has collected, 100% should be given to the state. And whatever is being collected as import VAT, international services VAT, and all of that, because we even know from the data that we have right now, things that are collected from Lagos, like imports and co, is the customs that are collected. So if we have things that are collected like that, then that should be shared. Aminat, I hope you understand me. I'm trying to be a tax consultant this morning.
Yes, I will try to address some of the issues you have raised, under different points. So if I'm addressing the issue of collection versus sharing,
distribution, yes.
I don't think there's an issue with collection at the moment because, based on the available arguments, the federal government collects and then shares on, the formula. So the issue is really more of how equitable is the sharing formula. Like Yomi mentioned at the beginning, the formula is 50 to states, 35 to local governments, and then 15 to the federal government. There are actually a lot of arguments that have been raised on the fact that if this new law or if this new judgment is implemented, the federal government actually stands to benefit because the federal government still has jurisdiction over, VAT on trade and commerce between Nigeria and other countries, which is the one that is collected at the ports. So a lot of people, just like Yomi has mentioned, chances are the states might not be better off than they actually are. So the question is really about the sharing formula. So we have the derivation formula of 20% for, the states. So the question is that enough? So yes, perhaps at the end of the day, the question will be, how do we ensure that the states that are buoyant are actually deemed or actually seeing that they are getting most of the money that is being contributed by activities in their states? And there's been a lot of arguments in the papers, there's been a lot of discussions on this issue, and I think that's what Yomi was trying to analyze when he was talking about the fact that the states might not actually be better off when they are taking this. And that's, if I may say, that's using the headquarter effect. So a lot of people believe that because some businesses are residents in the headquarters of some businesses are residents in a particular state, chances are they may get more. But by the time it is decentralized and each of these VAT is going to the states that is actually generating them. So yeah, there's an argument on that angle that perhaps the states might not be better on in the short run. but we should not lose sight of what will happen in the long run. I think the proponents of the states collecting VAT are actually looking at it from the angle of, if states are standing alone, they would put in more effort to ensure that they also develop their states. So for instance, let me give you an example. If you look at the Nigeria Bureau of Statistics records, currently in Nigeria, unemployment is about 33.3%, which means that there is enough room for economic activities. There's enough room for more activities that would generate economic development in each of the states. So there are so many arguments that can be made, but I would say let's let the law run its course. And at the same time, let each of the states and the federal start looking inward on how they would, how this will be resolved once the final judgment is given. On the last one on derivation, I think again, like we have been arguing, the truth is maybe the solution will be to relook what we currently have. So yes, we have 20% for derivation, and then the balance is shared on equality and population. Perhaps we need to look at a way of revamping what the derivation formula, even though a lot of people have said the VAT derivation is higher than what you even have for the oil producing states. But since these agitations are out there, it may really be a good time for us all to revamp the arguments and benefits to collecting centrally. And I can also understand the fact that collection at the state is yet to be done, and nobody really knows how it's going to go. So again, these are, even if issues occur, they can easily be fixed. One of the issues that has been talked about a lot is the input-output mechanism. I had some discussions with some of my colleagues, and that can also be fixed, because the input mechanism as we know it today is based on the existing VAT Act. If the governors come together, to discuss how this issue will be resolved, I think at the end of the day, a solution can be put in place. One of the solutions that's been canvassed is if you can apportion the input VAT from your state to the output in each state, and you'll be able to offset it as required. So I'm saying let's not close our minds to what is currently obtainable, and saying that because what is obtainable is simple and easy, chances are if we change it, there would be a distortion. Let's let things run its course, and where necessary, we as professionals can come up with even solutions to ensure that whatever challenge the states are facing would be resolved.
Okay, let me come back to you, Yomi, and let's take a look at the question of equity, equality, fairness that Rivers State as well as Lagos State has put forward. Especially, of course, a lot of people, many Nigerians got swayed with the political part of it in terms of, okay, how can I in my state be consuming alcohol, for example, and VAT is being paid on it. And at the end of the day, other states that have Sharia laws in their states do not consume that alcohol, but they will take the money. So they like the money, they don't want to consume alcohol. That is part of those discussions. When I had to take a look at the MBS's data on alcohol consumption in Nigeria. And in fact, the figure that was close to 100 billion naira on there's alcohol consumption in Nigeria. You see states like Lagos topping the list, where you people are, they drink a lot of beer and alcohol. 25 billion naira, Akwa Ibom 14 billion, Anambra 14 billion. I had to go look for Rivers State. Rivers State 6 billion naira on alcohol. Benue State says, the governor said a few days ago that it's mandated is the Attorney General to take a look at that. Benue State is consuming 5 billion naira worth of alcohol. Delta State, my own state of origin, 8 billion naira. So I can go on and on. Edo State, 11 billion naira. That is one part of the question, equity, equality, as well as fairness. The other part of the question, which I also want to pose to you, Yomi, and perhaps Aminat can take a bit of that, is that are states really generating enough VAT as claimed? Just like you said earlier, and I want to probe that question further. 1.53 trillion generated from VAT in 2020, and most of that came from the import VAT. Is that not what you guys call it? Import VAT at the yes at the customs. some of it also from FCT Abuja because of the federal government contracts. So let's hit or get these numbers, you know, more than we are doing, especially as I'm seeing around talk shows and newspapers.
Right. So Nancy, you are raising a very critical question. So the question around equity and fairness and which state contributes what and state that have you know, morally restrictive you know, policies and all of that. It's all important. But I don't think we should major on the minor, right? And that argument alone, I don't think it's sufficient, you know, to conclude the whole matter, in as much as it's part of the conversation. So if I go by your data, now let's say the statistics are right. So there's 100 billion naira on alcohol consumption. 7.5% of that is 7.5 billion. All right, that is supposed to be, you know, part of the number we are talking about. The total collection in last year is 1.5 trillion naira. So it's not going to be sufficient to change the whole equation, you know, totally. It's not going to be sufficient to change the equation. And it's also not true to assume that or to conclude that the entirety of the region, particularly many of the states that practices Sharia, we cannot be hasty in our generalization that the entirety of the northern region don't even have some element of you know, sales of alcoholic beverages in their states. There are some of the northern states that actually do have brewery plants. All right, so it's not complete information, but it's a valid argument. So in terms of whether it's a point to you know, to consider. So my own argument is that, look, when states lay claim to, you know, the total amount that they think they are contributing, the number of the elements that makes it so, because the structure that we currently run makes it so. So say, for example, Lagos State, or any state for that matter, the amount that each state puts to the center sometimes is determined by the location of the businesses, you know, because many businesses also, you know, I mean, the tax law allows or actually require that the filing and the remittances of the VAT is actually centralized from the head office. So most multinational companies have their headquarters in Lagos, for example. Almost all the public listed entities have their headquarters in Nigeria, from banking to FMCG to consumer, you know, to manufacturing and all of that. And so it doesn't mean that the consumption all happens in Lagos, in as much as there's a huge percentage, maybe close to 40% of that comes in through Lagos State. Now, when this process is, or if this law is decentralized, and each state will need to account for VAT for consumption happening in their state, you will notice that the amount that Lagos State previously have will go down significantly. That's the first argument. Now, you mentioned the input VAT and the import VAT, international services VAT, and the FCT. Out of the 1.5 trillion or thereabout, nearly 60% of that is attributable to what the customs collect and what the FCT collect because of the federal government. You know, so when you take this out, you are talking of 40% less. So if a state, you know, contribute about 40% of the 60%, and you take away the headquarter effect of the remittances, the number will go down significantly. So I agree that it's okay for us to go through the whole of this legal process and see where it lands us. But in my view, when you are designing a system, you design a system with the end in view. I do not think the legal route alone will solve this problem. So if we resolve this issue, I mean, legally, and the law says states should be empowered to administer, because that's what fiscal federalism says, that's what is equitable for, you know, for the state that are deriving the money. Now, what does that mean for the business? So we can't wait until the whole, you know, cards, you know, crumbles before we start redefining the solution. We already have a system where there's a lot of moving parts, there's a lot of challenges that we are dealing with. And we can take a cue from what is happening all around the world. There is no federation anywhere in the world that doesn't have some element of sharing. None, not a single one. We have examples of countries also that have practiced the decentralized system and realizes that it's not good for business, and they came back to centralize. India is an example with 29 different states. Now, they previously were decentralizing their sales and good tax or VAT, if you like to just use that terminology, in the state. And it was bad for trade. It was bad for commerce. It was bad for interstate. There's a lot of challenges that were arising from that, and they reverted to centralized system. Other countries that currently have it decentralized are having conversation towards, a centralized system because of the administrative ease and the convenience. So it's a country like Brazil, a country like Canada, there are conversations going on. So we have it currently centralized, and we are going to a system where a number of people are running away from. If we decentralize VAT, we will still have some amount that still needs to be shared centrally. And we can't even use the argument of what is paid for oil revenue in terms of derivation for VAT, because the law clearly makes that, a centrally collected revenue and to be shared. For consumption tax, supposed to be administered by the state. So maybe part of the thing that we should do, if we see decentralization as a more effective system from business impact and all of that, let's go back to the allocation formula and just be fairer. Well, I can't sit here and maybe just throw numbers in the air, but for me, if we're talking about a tax item that ideally should be within the jurisdiction of the state, there is no reason why, for example, derivation should not be, say, as high as 50%, all right? There's no reason why it shouldn't be so. So if we treat that simple statistics alone and say derivation is 50%, equality is 30%, for example, and population is 20%, you've changed the whole conversation completely. That would be seen as, a lot more fairer, and you can help to make sure that the business landscape is not further burdened by the compliance challenges and all of that. And if eventually we think it's the way of the state that we want to go, there are also a number of variables that we can think ahead and use in redesigning the form. Maybe the state shouldn't actually be legislating VAT law. Maybe all that we need to do in each of the states is to just go back to our sales tax or sales and goods tax, all right? So that all of the complications over, governors need to sit and agree how input VAT is deducted and all of that, we can preempt that and we can deal with that. This is a federal structure. It's a federation. You will always have political differences. So what happens if, when you are having the argument and you are calling the states together, maybe you have more states that are controlled by a political party, and then 4 years down the line, there's a change in the political structure, and then something else happens. So we don't want to continue along this line.
Okay.
The reason why we're saying consumption tax should be under the state legally is because there is a current gap in the constitution that doesn't make it an item on the exclusive legislative list. Why don't we fix that? All right, and make it so, and then make sure that we deal with, the principles that make it fairer, make it more equitable. All right, let the states that are deriving get more from the center, because they have more issues to deal with in their states because of the business activities going on. So that's what I think we should do, and there are several variables within that within the VAT law that we can still deal with. We can deal with whether it's sales and goods tax and agree on that. We can deal with the issue of derivation in the allocation formula. We can deal with the cost of collection that FRS currently gets. We can deal with that. So we can deal with improving the collection by the taxpayer. And Nancy, I think you mentioned that earlier. I don't even think we are generating enough 1.5 trillion naira revenue from an economy that is nearly like have a $500 billion economy. It's not efficient. It's not effective. We are not going to get it better by
with the exchange rates now.
It's not going to get improved by decentralization. It's only going to get better if we strengthen the existing central system and deal with the sharing and the allocation to be more equitable and to be more fairer.
In fact, some of the conversations we should begin to have right now, it's not even more about consumption and sharing and eating, chopping everything. I have not heard as much as I have heard with this temerity and with this strength, more of production, which we should be focusing on in terms of, okay, we are in a pandemic time right now, how much should we produce? Aminat, let me bring you in here. We see that the states, the taxes that they've been administering, I think stamp duties, is it personal income tax? Which other one do they administer? Property tax and the local government.
Capital gains.
Yes, yes. How much of this have they even been able to administer? That's number one. Number two, I had to go to the Lagos State, what the House of Assembly passed, and let's take it from there. They brought down the tax VAT rate to 6% from 7.5% national VAT rate. LIRS, that's the Lagos State Internal Revenue Service, responsible for tax administration, registration of taxpayers. Non-resident companies are also required to register, but if the company does business in the state, it should register. Importers must pay VAT before clearing goods. 25% VAT revenue, if they are able to do this, 25% will go to local government. Lagos State will take 75%. Then to pay VAT by the 21st day of the succeeding month. But the interesting thing for me here is that VAT, the list of exempt lists, is similar to the national VAT. We know that there are some products that are exempted, like pharmaceutical products, medical products, books, and all of that. But no exemption for small businesses. And I think that's where every business should. Yes, every business, your ear should go up now. That if Lagos is able to do this, that exemption you have, if you're 25 million naira below, there is no exemption again. There's no exemption for small businesses with turnover below 25 million. And we know that we saw this exemption from the Finance Act of, is it 2019 or so? So speak to us on that. For Rivers, it's still 7.5%. Rivers State still left it at 7.5%, and to begin collection this month, as before the Court of Appeal came in.
I didn't hear the last
Yes,
thing.
I said before the Court of Appeal ordered both states to hold status quo. Yeah, go ahead, Aminat.
Okay, so, yeah, let me start from the Lagos State's reduction of the rates. It was quite surprising when the law was promulgated by the Lagos State Assembly to see that it was actually a reduction of 1.5%. And again, the question is, why a reduction in the rates? Some people, or I myself, I think it's a way of the states putting out a kind of support to businesses to say that we are reducing the rate for you, a 1.5, because as you know, VAT is a consumption tax, which means that whatever business is paying it is actually gaining 1.5%. So I think that's what the Lagos State is trying to do. But like you mentioned, there is a flip side, which is the fact that the current national law actually exempts small and medium enterprises. And that is not done by both the Lagos State and the Rivers State law. So that already puts a strain on the ease of doing business agenda that the federal government has been running over the period. In addition to that, we also noticed from a review of the Lagos State law that the penalties are stiffer compared to what you have with the national law. So yes, to some extent, if peradventure the law is promulgated and the ruling is in favor of the states, I think it's something that Lagos State will need to take into consideration. First of all is the tax exemption for small and medium scale enterprises, and also the penalty. The penalties are stiff, especially as small and medium scale businesses are going to be required to pay VAT based on the Lagos State law. So that's relief that has been introduced by the national law has kind of been taken away by Lagos State and Rivers State. You're right that most of the provisions of the law actually mirrors the existing VAT, and I felt that was I felt that was something the states were doing to ensure that the change is not drastic, because like I said earlier, VAT is a law that's VAT collection in Nigeria has been ongoing for over 2 decades, and if there's going to be a change between the collection agency, then the drastic change should not be felt by the populace. And I totally agree with Yomi when he mentioned the fact that a lot of these issues are going to be borne by the taxpayers. I think one thing that we need to take into consideration are the canons of taxation, which talks about equity, talks about certainty and all that. So all these controversies are actually for the taxpayers, because it is the taxpayers that are wondering, who am I going to be paying the tax to at the end of the month? So we have less than seven days before the VAT is to be filed. as it stands, even though the Court of Appeal in Abuja has ruled that the tax should continue to be collected by the Federal Inland Revenue Service pending the finalization of the ruling by the Supreme Court, as the case may be. The fact still remains that Lagos State has indicated that it was not a party to that ruling, and on that basis, Lagos State is insisting that it would continue to collect the VAT. So all these things, at the end of the day, it's businesses that will suffer. So yes, I agree with the sentiment that in reviewing the law and in making the process in finalizing the process, we should take into consideration the businesses and also the taxpayers. Now, the other one I wanted to mention is Yomi's discussion on Introduction of Sales and Goods Act. I think that before that has been done, that's something that we already did in Nigeria. And when we saw that it was leading to an increase in cost of services for both the consumers and also for businesses, like you mentioned earlier, this will lead to a situation where all companies in Nigeria will have to deal with 36 states and the FCT. So I would say that I agree more with your argument that we should look at the allocation formula. We should ensure that the states that are pushing for the law to be repealed or for the collection of VAT to be in their jurisdiction, we should look at the arguments that they're actually making. But we cannot also shy away from the reasons for this argument in the first place. We cannot shy away from the fact that what is really being discussed is the constitutionality of what VAT, who should be administering VAT. So I share your sentiments that, some of these things should continue as they were. But we need to be careful that what we are doing is not really saying we do not want to rock the boat, because we are used to what we currently have.
Used to status quo that perhaps is not working. Yomi, let me bring you in here and let's still talk about this Lagos River stain. With what Lagos has put together, I'm wondering, will Lagos State have its own custom officers at the ports, so to speak? Because it's not just about saying these things. It's about the workability of, of some of these policies, or laws that the government is putting out. And I asked the question earlier, and I want you to speak about that. The taxes that the states are administering at present, property tax, capital gains tax, what tax again is that? Which one? Anyway, stamp duties and all of that. How efficiently have they administered that?
No, totally so. So valid question, but just before I just get on that, so the reason why, suggestions as to the possibility of exploring, sales and goods tax as an option, it's driven out of, even the VAT system that we currently administer. We all call VAT, but we probably don't know that this is not how VAT is operated in every other part of the country, even every other part of the world. Our VAT is essentially a sales tax in principle because because of the limited input VAT deductibility. So it already has an inherent increase in cost of sales. If you and I or anyone travel outside of the country, and then you buy just about anything in those countries, go to the South Africa here, go to the UK and all of that. We all file out at the airport to go and claim our VAT refund, for those goods. If we do businesses in many of those countries and you incur VAT on overheads or any other expense item, you claim full deduction. In Nigeria, all of that doesn't apply. And then we claim we are running a VAT. This is not how VAT is done in every other part of the world. So we either want to do VAT the right way or just bite the bullet and realize that, look, this is not essentially a VAT. And that issue will be complicated when it becomes decentralized. So that's the point I was making. So what's the point in having Lagos State, River State, and every other state have VAT, having their provisions, deduction of input VAT, that is not practical, that is not going to be effective, that is only going to be dependent on two governors liking each other and agreeing on how to do things. So it's not going to work. It's going to create a lot of chaos. It's going to increase cost of sales. It's going to end up with businesses treating those input VAT as expense. Because even as we have it, only input VAT on goods that are meant for resale.
Okay.
You know, or those ones that form direct cost of production. Those are the ones you can claim. You can't even claim all of your input VAT. So that's the reason why I said, in the real sense, we are not operating VAT the way it is done in every other part of the world. It's a modified sales tax or a modified VAT in some ways. And that challenge exists even now that it is central. When it becomes decentralized, it will be more complicated. Therefore, let's fix the constitutional issue that creates the gap. So I'm not necessarily advocating for continuation of status quo. I'm saying let's make the necessary amendment to fix it the way it should be fixed. It's not everywhere in the world that sales tax must be collected by the subnational government. It is only because the constitution says it is so, or leaves a gap. So if we fix the constitution today, and instead of having only stamp duty, taxes on income and on profit and capital gains as the one that's on the exclusive list, by just mere addition of VAT, it changes the whole legal determination of who is entitled to administer it. So that's the point I made around that area. And I know I need to wrap up very quickly, Nancy.
Very quickly.
So your question, the truth is that if you judge by the experience of what we currently have, you know, the effectiveness and the efficiency of the state internal revenue services in administering the taxes under their jurisdiction, you will know that you will have a lot of fears as to how well. So it's one thing for you to win the legal battle. It's another for you to win the economic benefit. And so that's the states are not likely to be better off.
Okay.
Not in the short term, not in the medium term.
Okay.
And therefore, all of this. So that's Nancy. Maybe just one more point to make.
Very quickly,
that
Yomi,
in all of these arguments, we have concentrated on the VAT because that's the one that other states have promulgated additional law to. Maybe Nigerians don't realize that the judgment of the High Court that actually, you know, nullify the powers of the FRS to that VAT actually charges on other taxes. It says FRS should not collect withholding tax. Okay. FRS should not collect education tax. FRS should not collect IT levy. Therefore, there is a lacuna in the system. Many businesses are going to be filing returns by end of September. They don't know whether to include the IT levy and education tax in their assessment.
Okay, I think, Yomi.
Some learned advocates have been on, senior advocates have been, I mean, I went on a show with his son.
Yomi, I think we'll you know, end it there. Let me quickly bring in Aminat just before we go, because we have to go now in a few seconds. Aminat, just your closing remarks as the implication for businesses very quickly in 20 seconds. Aminat, can you hear me? Aminat, yes. Yes, please, I just want to get your final take on the implications for businesses and perhaps what the playbook will be for other states in just 20 seconds before we go.
Okay, so like you have mentioned, as of today, the the Court of Appeal has ruled that status quo should be maintained. And based on my understanding of that ruling, it is actually that the FIRS should continue to collect the VAT. So yes, status quo is FIRS collect VAT for September and going forward until the judicial process is finalized. So yes, for today, I think businesses will just continue to do what they're currently doing until we get some more direction from the courts.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Yomi. I wish we can go, you know, because there's still many issues. But perhaps we'll continue to look at the developments in the coming days, and we'll be back here again to discuss some of those developments because, you know, it's still an ongoing story. So thank you very much, Yomi, for joining us on the program. I've been speaking with Yomi Olugbenro, the West Africa tax leader at Deloitte, and Aminat Jegede. She is a senior manager, tax regulatory and people services at KPMG Nigeria. Thank you all for being a part of the show today. Also, thank you to our audience for joining us. Please join us again tomorrow. God willing, I'll be here. Nancy Naji is my name. Be the best you can be and be the change you want to see. Bye now.